The blinking cursor mocked me from the blank Word document. I, Quincy, a 44-year-old architect in bustling Chicago, was supposed to be drafting plans for a new community center. Instead, I was staring into the abyss of my marriage, a pit I'd unwittingly dug with years of complacency and blind trust. My wife, Leona, was a whirlwind of energy, a successful marketing executive always on the go. We'd met at a charity gala 10 years ago, a classic whirlwind romance culminating in a beautiful wedding and a comfortable life in a Lincoln Park brownstone. We were the envy of our friends, the picture of success and happiness, or so I thought. The first crack appeared subtly, almost invisibly. Leona started working later, attending more out-of-town conferences, and generally becoming more distant. I chalked it up to the pressures of her job, the demands of a high-powered career. I, ever the understanding husband, made dinner, did the laundry, and kept the house running smoothly, all while designing buildings that would shape the city's skyline. Then came the phone calls. Late at night, whispered conversations in the hallway, Leona's voice tight with secrecy. When I asked, she'd brush it off as work-related, a sensitive client, a confidential deal. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But a gnawing unease began to fester in my gut. The final straw, the event that shattered my carefully constructed reality, came in the form of a misplaced receipt. I was tidying up her purse, a rare occurrence, when a small, crumpled piece of paper fell out. It was a receipt from a fancy restaurant downtown, dated last Tuesday, a night Leona had told me she was working late. The name on the receipt wasn't a client, it was a man's name. Barnaby, Barnaby. The name echoed in my head, a discordant note in the symphony of our life. I knew no Barnaby. Leona had never mentioned a Barnaby. Who was this man who was sharing intimate dinners with my wife while I was home, microwaving leftovers and drafting blueprints, driven by a mixture of rage and despair? I did something I'd never done before. I snooped. I went through Leona's phone while she was in the shower, a violation of her privacy that made my skin crawl. But I had to know. I had to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And painful it was. The messages were explicit, the language raw and intimate. Leona and Barnaby were having an affair, a full-blown, passionate affair that had been going on for months. The messages painted a picture of a woman I no longer recognized, a woman who was deceitful, manipulative, and utterly devoid of remorse. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the air knocked out of my lungs. The world spun, the bathroom tiles swam before my eyes. I stumbled out of the bathroom, clutching the phone like a weapon, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Leona emerged from the shower, her face flushed, her hair wrapped in a towel. She saw the phone in my hand, the look on my face, and her expression changed from relaxed to wary in an instant. "What's that?" she asked, her voice tight. I didn't say a word. I simply held out the phone, letting her see the damning evidence for herself. She grabbed the phone, scrolled through the messages, and her face paled. "Quincy, I can explain," she stammered, her eyes wide with panic. "Explain," I said, my voice hoarse. "Explain how you've been lying to me for months. Explain how you've been betraying me with some guy named Barnaby. Explain how you've turned our marriage into a joke." She started to cry, tears streaming down her face. "It just happened," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake." "A mistake," I repeated, incredulous. "This wasn't a mistake, Leona. This was a deliberate act of betrayal. This was a choice you made over and over again." She tried to touch me, to take my hand, but I recoiled from her touch as if she were poison. "Don't," I said, my voice shaking. "Just don't." That night I slept on the couch, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a physical burden. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. My world had been shattered, my trust irrevocably broken. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and painful conversations. Leona begged for forgiveness, promised to end the affair, swore that she still loved me. But the damage was done. The trust was gone. I couldn't look at her without seeing Barnaby's face, without hearing the echoes of their whispered conversations. I moved out of the brownstone, finding a small apartment in River North. The space felt empty and sterile, a stark contrast to the warm, inviting home I had shared with Leona. But it was mine, a sanctuary from the lies and betrayal. As I started to rebuild my life, I learned more about Barnaby. He was a venture capitalist, a smooth-talking charmer with a reputation for bedding married women. He was everything I wasn't: confident, aggressive, and utterly unscrupulous. I also learned that Leona wasn't his only conquest. He had a string of affairs behind him, leaving a trail of broken hearts and shattered marriages in his wake. He was a predator, and Leona had been his prey. The realization didn't make me feel any better. It didn't erase the pain or undo the betrayal, but it did give me a sense of clarity, a sense of purpose. I decided that I wasn't going to let Barnaby get away with what he had done. I wasn't going to let him continue to destroy lives with impunity. Using my connections in the architectural world, I started digging into Barnaby's business dealings. It didn't take long to uncover a pattern of shady investments, unethical practices, and outright fraud. I gathered my evidence, meticulously documenting every transaction, every lie, every instance of wrongdoing. Then I took it to the authorities. The investigation was swift and thorough. Barnaby's empire crumbled, his reputation tarnished, his freedom threatened. He was facing serious charges, charges that could land him in prison for years. Leona, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. She lost her job, her friends, and her reputation. She was ostracized by the community, branded as the woman who had cheated on her husband with a notorious womanizer. I didn't take any pleasure in her misfortune. I didn't gloat or celebrate. I simply moved on, focusing on my work, my friends, and my own healing. One evening, a few months after Barnaby's arrest, I received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering, unsure of who it could be. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Quincy, it's Leona," the voice on the other end said, her voice trembling. I almost hung up, but something stopped me. "What do you want, Leona?" I asked, my voice cold. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," I repeated, incredulous. "Thank you for what? For destroying my life?" "No," she said. "Thank you for exposing Barnaby. Thank you for showing me what kind of man he really was. I was blind, Quincy. I was so caught up in the excitement and the attention that I didn't see the truth. You saved me, Quincy. You saved me from making an even bigger mistake." I didn't know what to say. I was still angry, still hurt, but I couldn't deny the sincerity in her voice. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Leona," I said finally, "but I hope you can find some peace in your life." "I hope so too," she said. "Goodbye, Quincy. Goodbye, Leona," I said, and hung up the phone. The call didn't magically erase the pain or undo the betrayal, but it did offer a sense of closure, a sense of acceptance. I continued to rebuild my life, focusing on my work and my friends. I started dating again, cautiously, tentatively. I learned to trust again, slowly, painfully. One day, while working on a new project, I met a woman named Corinne. She was a landscape architect, a free spirit with a passion for nature and a kind, generous heart. We connected instantly, drawn together by our shared love of art and design. Corinne was everything Leona wasn't: honest, authentic, and utterly devoid of pretense. She didn't try to impress me or manipulate me. She simply accepted me for who I was, flaws and all. We fell in love slowly, deeply, and irrevocably. We built a new life together, a life based on trust, respect, and unwavering support. I learned that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to break you. It can make you stronger, more resilient, and more appreciative of the good things in life. Leona's betrayal was a painful chapter in my life, a chapter I would never forget. But it was also a catalyst for change, a turning point that led me to a better, happier, and more fulfilling life. And as I sat at my drafting table, sketching plans for a new community center, I realized that I had finally found peace, not in forgetting the past, but in embracing the future. This story is about Quincy, a devoted husband and talented architect whose world crumbles when he discovers his wife, Leona, is having an affair with a venture capitalist named Barnaby. The betrayal leads to a painful divorce and a quest for justice as Quincy exposes Barnaby's corrupt dealings. While Leona faces the consequences of her actions, Quincy finds healing and a new love with Corinne, learning that betrayal doesn't have to define him and that a brighter future is possible. This narrative explores themes of infidelity, betrayal, justice, and the resilience of the human spirit, offering a message of hope and the possibility of finding love again after heartbreak. Remember, even in the darkest moments, there is always the potential for renewal and a better tomorrow.